Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Amanda Werner, your host, and this podcast is all about empowering students now. I want to talk today about defiance. Defiance. There's a lot of that happening in schools. A lot of kids who seem to be defiant, who seem to be checked out, who seem to be not doing okay. And I've noticed a lot of teachers, myself included, when I was still teaching, talking about how all they do all day is manage behaviors. So I think this episode is a really important one because it's about what we mistake for defiance. And I think that I'd love to tell you about my kid. They were diagnosed with autism in 2021. I was diagnosed in 2025. And in 2021, they were in first grade. What happened before that? Why did we get this diagnosis? And I'm just going to say one word: defiance. Preschool and kindergarten, just anytime I dropped my kid off, there was, and then picked them up, there was this misunderstanding. But at the time, I thought that it was my fault. I thought it was my husband's fault that my kid was being defiant and spoiled and just a brat. This is really hard to talk about. I'm actually trying to write a book about this, about autism, about misunderstandings, about autistic behavior. So I think back to when I was a teacher before I was even a mom, and I didn't have kids. I taught for how many years? I think I taught for about 8 years before having a kid. I only have one kid, by the way. They're 11. And before I had a kid, I definitely did a lot of blaming. I definitely just assumed defiance, assumed laziness, assumed bad parenting, assumed, a lot about the behaviors that I was seeing in kids in my classroom. But I understand now, both as a teacher, a former teacher, an autistic person with ADHD, and a mom of a kid with ADHD and autism, that most of these students weren't defiant. They were drowning. And there are students like this in your classroom right now. Students whose behavior looks like defiance, looks like they're choosing to make your life hard, looks like they don't care. But what if they're not choosing any of this? What if you're seeing nervous system distress? What if you're seeing trauma responses? What if you're seeing autism behaviors, ADHD behaviors? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm excited to talk about this today because I've been wanting to talk about this a lot. I've been a teacher for 16 years, and all of those years I had no idea I was autistic too. And I'm here to tell you right now that I got a lot wrong throughout my career, misreading my students and their behavior. And I think that I probably said some things that hurt kids. And so I want you to learn about this so that you don't make the same mistakes I did. And so that your kids really benefit from having a teacher who's knowledgeable about all of this. So let's get started. Welcome to the Empower Students Now podcast, a podcast about equity, neurodiversity, mindfulness, and student engagement. There's a lot that needs to change in our education system. The good news is teachers have the power to make these changes now. So let's start by naming what we typically identify as defiant behavior. It's the student who's driving you up the wall, the student who's not following directions, who won't sit still, who is back-talking you or laughing behind your back, or the student who just never gets their work done, is constantly chatty, is constantly going to the bathroom, is sneaking food, sneaking phones, right? Like all of this. And I want you to think about, like, what does it feel like in your body when I mention all of these things? Like, what is most triggering or angering for you? What have you assumed these behaviors mean about the kid? What have you seen? And what did you assume based on what you saw or observed? And what was your reaction to all of this? Me personally, I mean, I had a kid one year who would throw his shoes. Like, he would get angry and throw his shoes around the classroom and run away and scream. And it was really, really hard. And just to put it as lightly as I can, I did not like this kid. He made my life really, really hard. And I had a lot of assumptions about his behavior. And I had a lot of challenges and struggles helping him and trying to like him. And he actually did have a few diagnoses, but none of them were autism or ADHD. And looking back on it, I don't know. I mean, I think he was probably misdiagnosed, but there could be a lot going on. And it is very, very helpful for parents to seek support outside of the school, but also to seek support from the school psychologist, the counselors, things like that, especially for these really huge behaviors that are like continually happening every day, day in and day out, like a kid throwing their shoes around the room and screaming at the top of their lungs. That something needs to be done. Resources need to be brought in, and the school I was at, no one supported me. I mean, we had lots of meetings, but nothing really happened because of this. I had to figure it out. And what I figured out was that he needed a space all to himself in the back of the room, hidden from everyone else, like behind this couch. And I did a lot of bending that year, a lot of like, he's not screaming, he's not throwing his shoes, like, I'm happy, like a lot of like, I let a lot go, so that this kid wasn't having meltdowns in the middle of class. And I learned the hard way that his need for isolation from the class during certain subject areas was very, very high. He would read his books and he had his toys around him, and he wasn't disruptive. And so forcing kids to comply is not always the best idea and often can cause meltdowns. So what I saw was a defiant kid, but what was going on underneath was a lot more complex, and I had to adapt to that. So let's go a little bit deeper. So when a kid refuses to do something, you say something like, you give instructions like finish what you're working on, put your pencils down, close your books, put them in your desk, get your math journal out, turn to page 23, start the first 3 problems. Like those seem like very clear instructions, but that's a lot of steps. That is a lot of steps. And a kid who is autistic or ADHD, they are probably going to struggle with all those steps, right? So, and a kid that's autistic especially might be distracted by other kids in the room, noises, their clothing. They might be thinking about their special interest. They might be thinking about recesses in 20 minutes and they're scared because they don't like recess. I mean, there could be so many things going on while you're giving these steps. And especially ADHD kids, their working memory can only hold 2 instructions, and the rest of the instructions disappear. So what this means is they're not choosing not to follow your directions. They are literally unable to retain all of that because they're so overwhelmed in a classroom. They might freeze, they might melt down, they might just not do the work. And you might assume this is defiance, but really it's just system overload, right? Like this is so important. All right, so next, what about talking back? What if a kid is talking back to you or arguing? I really relate with this a lot. Like in my classroom, I always told students why we were doing what we were doing and why it was important, because I always needed to know why myself. Autistic people often, the reason they're defiant is because they don't understand why you're asking them to do what you're asking them to do. They need to feel like what they're doing is important and that it matters. And if it's just busy work, they don't understand what the point of it is when they could be doing something else that's more important, like learning about their special interest. So, and they need logic. They need instructions to feel like they're important. So, and a lot of times they need very direct instruction, like very clear, explicit, like just give them the next thing to do, just one direction. A lot of autistic people also are verbal processors. I can relate with this as well. So I need to be able to talk in order to make sense of my very messy, complicated brain. It's very messy in there and very overwhelming in there. And so being able to talk out loud is important. And so, and with ADHD, it can be hard to suppress your thoughts, and you might accidentally say something rude because your self-control, your impulse control is low. And so they might say something rude accidentally. And so that's important to know too. All right. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today about reframing defiance. There's a lot more I could say, but I think we're going to wrap it up here. So there's just a mindset shift that I think we all need to have when it comes to working with kids. And I'm saying this to myself too, because I'm a parent of a neurodivergent child and all of their friends come over. And so just always, instead of thinking this kid is being defiant on purpose, this kid won't do this because they're a big jerk. No, you got to shift that to this kid can't do this right now. I'm not sure why yet, but right now they're not able to. And then get curious about why. Why aren't they able to right now? And this shift in thinking, it can change how you respond to this behavior. Instead of thinking of it as they won't and they're defiant, and having consequences and sort of escalating the situation. When you think a child can't, that they're not able to right now, or there's something getting in the way of them being able to do what you're asking, you can start to problem solve and offer support. So an old response to students not working or not doing what you ask might be like talking to them really sternly. You need to start working right now. What are you doing? If you don't start in 5 minutes, you're going to miss recess, or you're going to go to lunch late, or you've got to go to detention. The new response can be, I noticed you haven't started yet. What's making it hard for you to get started? So do you notice how it's more like of a curiosity stance, so that you can offer support as needed? That is such a huge shift in the interaction that you have between you and this student that is supposedly defiant, right? Like it just helps things not escalate into some sort of, emotional argument. So just making sure that you're always pausing before you're reacting to quote unquote defiant behavior, being curious about what are some things that this kid might be going through right now, and even asking them, because they are experts on their own experience. I mean, they might not know, and you could offer suggestions of what you think might be going on for them, and saying, well, maybe is the classroom too loud for you right now? Or, like if they don't know why they can't do the thing, or that they're arguing. You can offer less choices. You can offer alternatives. You can offer breaks. All of these things help so much more than being an authoritarian, or authoritative. I always forget which one's the bad one, authoritarian or authoritative parent. I don't know. You know what I mean. All right. I hope this episode has helped, and that it's shifted your thinking about those kids that are really getting on your nerves. It's, spring is around the corner, and kids' behavior is definitely harder and harder to manage when it's pretty outside, right? So I just hope that this has helped. And if it has, remember, share it with someone or someone's. Thank you again for listening. Bye-bye.